We can all feel how essential it is for us that our homes are functioning and making us able to relax and to thrive. There is ongoing data monitoring our homes, and right now we'll get two different people presenting the data that is right now, the recent data that is available right now on our homes, and also what is different in a post-pandemic perspective. First speaker is Ingrid Reumert. She's the Vice President at VELUX Sustainability and Public Affairs, and she's going to present the findings from the VELUX Healthy Home Barometer. Afterwards, I'll talk to Katie Mccrory from IKEA, who also will present some data. But first, it's Ingrid Reumert. Welcome, Ingrid.
Thank you very much.
You will present the findings, and then afterwards we'll have a debate, you and me and Katie. But go ahead.
Thank you very much, Anne, and great to be here. And what a program that you've already been through this morning. It's truly exciting and bringing in all different perspectives. I will speak about the healthy buildings, where we are first in a macro sense. Looking at shortly at the COP, but then EU level, and then I will go into some of the data we have from VELUX Healthy Homes Barometer, and then I will be happy to take a discussion afterwards. But I thought just to give my perspective to start with from the COP, where I had the pleasure of spending almost a week last week. Of course, I followed the discussion you had this morning around the results of the COP26, and maybe I think if I should just paraphrase Nigel Topping, the UN high-level champion for climate, I think his view on whether was it a success or not, he says it depends on whether you see the COP26 as a still or as a movie, part of a movie. Because if you see it as a still, of course, we are not where we should be. But if you see COP26 as part of a movie, then it's clear that we are on the right path and moving in the right direction. The trajectory is completely correct. So I think that that's a good perspective. We know before the Paris Agreement, we were at a 6 degrees, then after Paris Agreement, 4 degree scenario, before Glasgow 2.4. And now if all pledges are fulfilled, we will be at a 1.8 degree scenario. And then with regard to buildings, I think also really positive that around almost 100 countries have mentioned buildings in one way or the other in their NDCs, national determined contributions, including a lot of the really big countries like China, India, Japan, etc. And then also what I think was really clear from being present at the COP is that the conversation around building has fundamentally changed. We're talking about whole life carbon, embodied carbon. There's strong commitments coming out. So it is all also the non-state actors, and I would include, of course, our sector, the building sector, and that is really moving forward. So jumping from the UN level into what we're working with in VELUX, we have launched our sustainability strategy now a year ago. It is a holistic view of the entire business consisting of 15 targets in total, but the essence of our sustainability commitment is to become lifetime carbon neutral by 2041. And this is a new concept where we both take responsibility for our historical carbon emissions all the way back to when we were founded in 1941. We recapture all the CO2 we have emitted, in total 5.6 million tons CO2 recaptured through nature-based solutions in a partnership lasting for 20 years together with the World Wildlife Foundation. And moving forward, we also, of course, take responsibility for the future, which is where the big transformation of the built environment lies. Here we have committed ourselves to the Science Based Targets Initiative, the most ambitious trajectory of 1.5 degree scenario. And this means that we will become fully carbon neutral as a company in 2030, but also that we will halve the CO2 from our value chain, the so-called scope 3. And that is, of course, also where the real transformation lies, is if we can get the whole value chain to transform. So we are looking forward to cooperating with our partners to achieve this goal of lifetime carbon neutrality at our 100 years anniversary in 2041. Briefly looking at the EU, because we also see buildings having a very strong presence in the EU Green Deal and now the so-called Fit for 55 package, which is basically a tsunami of legislation going through the EU at the moment, reopening files that were only agreed a few years ago, basically to speed up the climate commitments. I'll just mention a few of relevance for our sector: the Energy Efficiency Directive, of course, where the energy efficiency first principle will be find a legal basis that will be important for renovation. There will be an ETS for buildings. So that means that buildings will be included in the quota system for CO2. And then finally, a new buildings directive, which will be published here on the 14th of December, and where we also really hope to see the health aspects included, as well as other topics around energy poverty, etc. So the challenge, of course, within the building sector and for sustainable buildings more at large is that it's often focused on energy and now, of course, also increasingly CO2, whereas the health aspects are often left out. And we heard, of course, the importance of this also this morning by Lydia Moravska around indoor air quality. And in VELUX, we have since 2015, every single year, been launching a so-called Healthy Homes barometer, which is in order for us to try to raise the awareness of the importance of healthy buildings. The reason why we are doing this is, of course, to start this conversation of the importance of health in a macro perspective, because we know that we have many cases, a big case library stating the importance of health with individual buildings or in communities, but we also need to have data on the macro level. So we work based on Eurostat data and do publish this big report every year. So giving you a few data from our work. We found in 2017 that 1 out of 6 Europeans live in an unhealthy home. And that accounts for 80 million Europeans. And the way that we have defined an unhealthy home is if you live with one of 4 risk factors: damp, darkness, noise, or cold temperatures. What we then found is that for children, it's actually even more severe. It's 1 out of 3 children who live in unhealthy homes. And that is the same as 26 million European children, or the entire population of Scandinavia. And the reason for this difference between adults and children is first that there are more children per household in countries with more unhealthy buildings, but also that parents tend to move out of the cities to the suburbs in search for better environments when they have children. And in the suburbs, there are more single family homes, as we know. And paradoxically, a lot of single family homes doesn't have the adequate health standard that they should have. So that is why the children are more at risk. It is actually so that children living in homes with 1 out of 4 risk factors are 1.7 times more likely to report poor health, whereas children who are exposed to all 4 risk factors are 4.2 times more likely to report poor health. And these consequences are completely the same regardless of your socioeconomic status. And the different health issues that we talk about, it can be eczema, pneumonia, asthma, allergies. The area where we have the best data is around the link between dampness and asthma. And it is so that you are 40% more likely to have asthma if you live in a damp home. And there are, of course, differences across countries. So some countries are well above the average. So that is Portugal, Cyprus, Lithuania, Belgium, the UK, where it's even worse. And where there's other parts of Europe where the status of the healthy buildings is better, Finland, Croatia, Estonia, etc. But I think that it's worth noticing that even in Finland, which has the lowest number of children at risk, it is still 20%. So, of course, you can also extrapolate this into an economic angle. And we know that every year there is a cost of inadequate housing of 200 billion euros. And that is equivalent to 1% of the European GDP. But what is interesting, if you imagine that with a snap of your fingers, we could update all European housing to a modern standard, the cost of doing so would be repaid within 18 months. So that's what we in business would call a good business case. So I would like to end my presentation with a short teaser of the next barometer coming. We will present this in February, so I don't have all the numbers to share with you yet. But what we're looking into here in the next barometer is also the area of life satisfaction. So we are adding to the data we have on energy cost, on economics that I just meant, on physical health, also the challenge of mental health on a macro level. So we're trying to see what kind of data can we bring forward for policy and decision makers about how unhealthy buildings also affect our mental health. And of course, with that has a societal impact and cost as well. So I think that was my 10 minutes spent. So I will end my presentation here. And then, of course, I'll be happy to engage in a discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ingrid, and it's great to get your presentation now, because in a few seconds I'll present Katie Mccrory from the IKEA Life at Home report, because both VELUX and IKEA are measuring quality of life in homes, quite logically so, and we'll have a discussion or a talk afterwards about how exactly is it that you measure and what are the consequences. But before we get to our talk, I'll present Katie Mccrory. She is the communications lead on the IKEA Life at Home report. Welcome, Katie.
Good afternoon, or good morning, good evening, wherever you are in the world joining us today. I'm here to talk a little bit about the IKEA Life at Home report. And my name's Katie, and I've been leading the report since 2017. I'd like to start by doing something a little different, actually. I'd like you to close your eyes. A lot of you are probably watching this from home, but some of you might be in an office or a co-working space. Maybe you're on the go or you're in a cafe. But I want you to imagine that moment when you put your key in the front door and you've had a long day on the go. How do you feel? Are you really pleased to be met by friends or family? Can you smell dinner being made? Are you comforted by the idea of kicking off your shoes and crashing out on the sofa? Or are you exhausted at the thought of that second shift? The childcare, the cleaning, the cooking. Maybe no one's there and the silence is deafening. And maybe actually the problem is that we can't remember what it's like to be on the go because we've spent so much time at home. So you can open your eyes now. Today, I want to talk about our feelings, and quite specifically, I want to talk about our feelings about home. Now, where we live, through choice or circumstance, is absolutely cut through with emotion. And our own research shows that most of us actually have really positive feelings about where we live. Last year, in the Life at Home report, we heard that 8 in 10 people said their home felt like their sanctuary during their pandemic. But what about the 1 in 5 who didn't feel that way? So in our research, we also heard about loneliness. We heard about the stress of working from home, juggling childcare, schooling your kids that needed to be out of school. There was no time or space for privacy, time to relax. We missed our friends and our families, and we often worried about our health as well. So home, quite frankly, is a really hard place to be when it doesn't feel good. Now, as a brand at IKEA, we've been in people's homes for almost 8 decades. And every time we meet someone, whether that's over coffee or it's over the internet or a piece of flat pack furniture, it's a chance to learn something new. And in fact, last year, through all of the research that we did across all of IKEA retail, we heard from more than 1 million people about the needs and dreams they have for their lives at home. But one of the most important pieces of research we do is the annual IKEA Life at Home report. And we've been running it for almost 10 years. And it's this report, it's this research that I think really helps us unlock the secret behind a thriving life at home. And so to date, we've connected with almost 250,000 people through this single piece of research alone. And all told, it means we have a lot of data on what people like to do at home, how they organize their spaces, how they like to make space for their activities. And we learn a lot, of course, about the home furnishing solutions they need and want as well. But thanks to the IKEA Life at Home report, we also know how people feel about where they live. And I think that puts us a lot closer to answering the question of how we can make life at home better. And this is because it shows us this vital connection. How we feel about our homes and how we feel about ourselves. So where we live, I believe, sets us up for everything else we do in life, from how we show up at work to our health and well-being. And I like to think that life at home is actually the beating heart of everyday life. So what have we learned over the years? Well, we learned something really important. Our research has helped us establish what we call the kind of emotional backbone, these building blocks of a good life at home. So no matter how big your home is or where it's located, all of us share this universal need for 5 core emotional needs: privacy, ownership, belonging, security, and comfort. And all together, I think this is what people really mean when they talk about feeling at home. But I also have to say that every year we track these emotional needs. And what we track is the expectations we have of our homes and the reality of whether we get those emotional needs met where we live. And I'm afraid to say there hasn't been a single year where across each of the 5 emotional needs, the expectation has been met by reality. So we either have wildly unrealistic expectations of our homes, or we, as professionals and experts working in this space, can maybe do a lot more to make sure that the homes that we build actually feel like home for the people living in them. And then last year, in 2020, everything we thought we knew was upended, of course, through COVID. So all the things we thought we understood were thrown around, and life at home was really kind of under the spotlight in a way that it had never been before. And suddenly homes, all of our homes, had to accommodate a lot more of life. And I can see how this created a seismic shift in the needs and the expectations that we place on our homes. And it reconfigured the things that we were looking for in our ideal places to live. And we saw 3 major shifts in the Life at Home report. We saw this move towards people wanting to live in much more multi-purpose homes with adaptable footprints. And we also saw that people wanted homes that felt much more plugged into their local communities as well. But I think it was this shift, the 3rd shift, that for me was the most exciting, because it required us to look at the idea of a healthy home, not just from the perspective of our physical health, but also, crucially, from the impact that it has on our mental health as well. And I think it felt like after years of building this wonderful foundational knowledge about the emotional aspects of home, we suddenly now have permission to step into the arena and talk about a topic that is perhaps not synonymous with a home furnishing retailer: mental health. So this year, we went into our research with a really big but vital question: does our home space support our headspace? And what we found actually was that people were, quite honestly, completely unable to talk about the last year that they've had in their life at home without always relating it back to their mental health. So I'd like to show you a video that introduces you to some of the people we met, shares some of the stories, and captures some of the insights that we learned.
Last year has probably been the hardest year of my life.
我是在做老婆吧，没有出去，就待在我现在上海的这个家里。
J'ai fait des réunions Zoom, etc. pendant ces périodes. J'y adhère pas. C'est très important pour moi et j'ai un peu souffert quand même.
All the football stopped, so we stopped seeing everyone. You don't realize how much you take things for granted, but the best thing you can have is people around you that care for you.
Yeah.
Being able to just talk to my family whenever, wherever, has really, I think, brought us closer.
Look, I have Kiki. We've unlocked a whole new way to engage with each other.
I cook with my wife. It's a good way of bonding. We play board games, we dance. I feel like this is my place to be here.
Now I feel like I'm really doing the things that I love doing every day, and it's been such a relief for my mental well-being. It's just my happy place.
So there were quite some sobering numbers in that video, but I think it also feels like a hopeful story too. Because as you heard, 40% of people who said that they felt more positive about their home also said they saw really positive impacts on their mental health too. And really, it confirms something that we've had this decades-long hunch about, that the path to good health and well-being starts at home. Because quite simply, happy homes make for happy people. So how do we take these insights and how do we turn them into action? Well, we found from this year's research that the routes to well-being typically clustered into 5 areas. This is how they tend to play out. So it's in the spaces that we occupy, the relationships we nurture, the community that we tend to, the rituals we perform, and the future that we dream about. And time and again, the data that we got showed us that people really deeply feel whether their home helps or hinders their mental health. And in this year, this 18 months of enforced reflection, it's also revealed people's new needs and perspectives as well. So like the 8 in 10 who say they really need to feel in control of where they live to feel good in themselves. Or the 1 in 3 who say a private garden is now one of the most important things for their well-being. And the 6 in 10 who discover that a closer connection to their community has really positive impacts on their mental health. And of course, all of this is underpinned by these 5 emotional needs. So people are continuing to build on this foundation of emotional needs for ownership, privacy, security, belonging, and comfort. So I would say, in answer to the question posed by this conference, which is how can we create well-being for people and planet through building design, that my suggestion is that our blueprints also factor in the emotions that we need as part of our building materials. Because better homes are ultimately built with feeling. So let's see if we can finally bridge that gap between the expectation that we have of our homes and the reality of whether we truly or not feel at home there. Thank you. And there's much more information on the website as well, where you can download the full report. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Katie. Very interesting findings, especially the post-pandemic ones. And welcome back to Ingrid. She is joining us in virtual space. And Ingrid, maybe I should start out by asking you, what do you think of Katie's findings? Because it's interesting that both IKEA and VELUX, of course, in different ways, measure the well-being of people and the way they interact in their homes. So what are your reaction to Katie's findings?
No, I find it extremely interesting, and I would look forward to going to the webpage and dig further into the findings. But I think we're seeing some of the same traits, both in terms of trends, in terms of the positives that you can get out of working with health and well-being within buildings, but also, of course, within the negatives that you get if you have poor building design or, in general, just poor surroundings. So I think there's both big opportunities, but also challenges at individual level, community level, and societal level as well.
So, but Katie, VELUX is mostly, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Ingrid, but VELUX is focusing on clean air and daylight. And what is that also part of your data, or is it more the social well-being?
No, it's definitely both. So I think through the research, we always try and understand the kind of form and function, but also the emotional context of what people are getting from the places that they live in. And so the space that people occupy and the place that they're in, of course, is absolutely around, do they have enough daylight? Do they feel that they're located in a community that gives them access to, the kind of employment or schools or shops, that kind of thing. So we track for that. We always track for how people feel about the kind of functionality of their home. But I think it's really important that we always have this layer of the kind of emotional context as well.
The mental well-being.
I think the mental well-being, but also just the kind of deeper sense that we get from whether the functionality of our home delivers to things like comfort. Does it give us the right space and the right environment so you get privacy, for example, which we know is a really important way that people get well-being. We have to have alone time with the people we love or on our own, for example. So I think it's important that we look at the two in combination, because I think you can't build a home without thinking about the functionality of how that delivers to health needs, but also this, the necessity of addressing the way that functionality delivers to our emotional needs. Because at the end of the day, if we don't feel at home where we live, then it's not home.
Even if the air is clean.
Even if the air is clean, you've got loads of daylight.
Oh, you've got loads of daylight.
If you feel miserable when you go to bed at night, because of the environment you're living in, and it could be, the home could be beautiful and could be very regenerative and restorative, but if you're living with people, if your relationships are dysfunctional at home,
or you
it's
don't
never
have
going to
enough
feel like
privacy
home. You don't have enough privacy, or it's not comfortable, or it just isn't giving you what you need. You don't feel secure, for example. So I think you can't unpick them. I think you need both.
Yeah. Ingrid, so at the VELUX Healthy Home Barometer, do you also look at these things as a part of your data? Not only the scientific part, but also the more fluffy parts that Katie are talking about, which is the feeling you have, whether you feel good at home or not, which can be many different factors that can constitute that.
Yes, we will increasingly with the next barometer, we will look into that. So we are working along the same way as IKEA. We don't have the numbers ready yet on it, and we're trying to see it in a European, a macro perspective. But I think what's interesting here is that well-being is a broad notion that can both be physical well-being, so linked to your physical condition, but also increasingly so mental well-being. And mental well-being, we know that some of the mental well-being stems from physical factors, because we know increased daylight and adequate access to fresh air helps your metabolism and your system. So there's a direct link there. But of course, we also know that mental well-being can come from other things, just like I mentioned, it can be your relationships, and it can also just be how the space makes you feel. Which is not necessarily linked to any kind of physical factor. But I think that the challenge in terms of buildings and building design is that we are working increasingly, of course, with a very strong legislative framework, which is, of course, positive in terms of CO2. That's also what has been discussed this morning. But in terms of health, it's still very weak how we should incorporate the health aspects into that. And we know that the building sector is very fragmented and is actually more like a value chain or chain of actors than a sector in itself. So and the sector moves when we get these kind of directions and signals. So I think we really have some work to do to convince decision makers that they should take the health and mental well-being aspects seriously on the same level as when we talk about energy and CO2, because in the end, sustainability is not only about our environmental and energy footprint, it's also very much around the social factors.
Yeah. Do you agree, Katie? How much do you, when you do your report, which you've been doing for a lot of years, How much do you communicate to the system surrounding us in society, the politicians and others who sort of shape our lives and by that also shape our homes?
Yeah.
Do you communicate your findings?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think we like to look at the insights as they always need to be actionable. They need to feel that people can learn something from it and then take a step in their own lives or in their own world of work. So, of course, we absolutely connect with decision makers and influencers around the world who, at a systems and organizational level, are responsible for larger infrastructure or larger decision making, regulations, and so on. So I think it's top down, bottom up. I think it's really important as well that the kind of data that we land on and the stories that we tell resonate with each individual. So you don't need to be in the building sector or work in an environment that makes you feel that you can kind of use data to shape policy, but actually you can use it to shape your own life at home.
Yeah.
So one of the wonderful things we always see when we do this research is everyone who has a touch point with it at IKEA ends up changing the way that their home is organized in order to better prioritize their emotional needs and their mental health. So you can see system change on a very granular level already happening kind of amongst IKEA co-workers. And there are like 200,000 of us, right? So if we're all doing that, if we're all taking that and internalizing the data and we're making a change in our own lives at home, I'm absolutely, every year I learn something new about myself when this research comes out. And it's not about me, but this is data that's relevant to my life. Then we've got 200,000 people making those changes, and then they're interacting with customers as well. The majority of people who work with IKEA are in our stores working with customers, and that conversation that they might have with someone who comes in and says, I'm looking for a new bed. If you can have a conversation that's like, okay, well, how do you sleep? Like, how do you get to sleep at night? Do you feel you're getting enough sleep? Is your sleep good? Let's have a conversation about that side of your needs. Are you able to relax and rest? So then I think you can build a much more empathetic conversation around what people are looking for. And I think that's really where you can really get system change happening at a meaningful level, because it's really kind of
internalized.
It's internalized. It really sits with us as individuals. We really passionately believe it because we've seen the impact it has on our own lives when we make those changes.
So you're 200,000 ambassadors. Actually.
Yeah, we are, absolutely, yeah.
Ingrid, I have a question here from HNS who is regards to the quite scary numbers about 1 out of 3 children living in an unhealthy environment in Europe. And the question is, who is the most important partners to change the scary numbers from VELUX research side? Is it politicians, investors, or Mr. and Ms. Smith in their private home? Because I was also very shocked by that number. So obviously we should do something about it quite fast, but who is sort of most important in partnering in this change that has to come?
Yeah. No, I agree on that. We were actually ourselves quite shocked when we got those numbers, and we did double check quite a few times before publishing them. I think there's 2 points. One is, of course, if you're exposed to one of the 4 risk factors, it has the same effect on you regardless of your socioeconomic status. That's just how it is. But with that said, we can also see that within that 1 out of 3 or 26 million European children, there are more children from low-income families. So, of course, there is also a socioeconomic angle to it. Yeah. So the lower your social income, the more exposed you are. So I think, and that kind of leads to some of the answers, because low-income families, they have a higher percentage of them living in community or council housing or rented apartments, etc. So there is a big responsibility for the property owners to provide adequate housing. And sometimes that's the public sector. In many cases, it is the public sector. We have very few incentives for the public sector to rent out adequate housing or provide adequate housing in terms of health. We do have it in terms of energy, but we don't have in terms of health. And the same is the case with private building owners who rent out. There are no legislation or demands, etc., to what should the status, health status of a property be before you can rent it out. There's no regulation around that. So I would say there's a big responsibility with the building owners, whether they're private or public. And also because, of course, there are things you can do yourself as a parent. And we know airing out, for example, 3 times a day, it can help a lot to the damp and mold questions. But the awareness around that is quite low. And we've also seen in past Healthy Homes barometers that a lot of people, they simply don't know that they have to air out, and they also, for example, dry their clothes indoors, and just, you could say, bad habits that could help. But I would say there is a big responsibility on the system rather than put it on the individual parents.
Okay, just building on that as well, because you talked about ownership, and obviously that has kind of functional connotations. Like, do you literally own the property that you live in?
Yes.
But we also classify it as one of the emotional needs as well. So do you emotionally feel that you have ownership of the space that you're in?
Yes, is this my house?
Yes,
or
exactly.
is it someone else's?
Can I make change to it in a way that's conducive to my mental or physical health? And I think that's what you're touching on, which is that too few people don't actually have the ability to make changes in their own home.
They're not allowed to make changes.
They're not allowed to make changes. So I think and that's kind of partly a regulatory issue, and also I think a cultural issue around kind of the way that, landlords have kind of administered properties and so on. And it's different, country to country. But I think hearing from the research this year that so many more people want to feel in control of where they live. And I think that idea of control, how can we think about control and ownership and how they go hand in hand? And also hearing that when people talk about their ideal life at home in the future, they're really, really reaching for homes that feel cleaner and greener, and that definitely has a lot to do with the quality of air, safe spaces. They want to feel secure. They want the environment to feel secure, and I think that really touches on, these sort of hidden nasties that we don't know are behind the walls, or also, chemicals that are coming in. So that real kind of, that interconnection, I think, of control and ownership, and also this need to feel that the space they're in is safe, is a clear kind of challenge that we need to respond to, because this is what people are really asking for.
And my last question, Ingrid,
sorry,
yes.
if I could add just one point, because I think also the challenge for children is that then once they leave their home, they go to school.
Yeah.
And we have the same challenge in schools.
Yeah, that's what Lydia told this morning. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. So we've had that for decades, the same challenge in schools. And I still think it's appalling that we have the legislation for work environments, for adults, for offices that is quite regulated, your access to daylight, fresh air, etc. But we don't have it for children. So the children's work environment is not regulated. And we know that it can have negative impacts, also as discussed this morning, but also, of course, the positive impacts in terms of increased productivity, learning, etc., which means that you can actually save up to 1 year of your primary school education. So it is quite significant. So I think we are not really dealing or being responsible enough for our children's health the way we could be.
No. And that is quite a sad point you're making there, but good that you mention it. My last question for you both: how is IKEA and VELUX? How are you using these results you get, the data you have now? What is sort of the concrete?
What do we do with it?
What do you do with it? Because you mentioned briefly, of course, you use it in terms of furniture and so on. But how do you use it?
So we treat insights in 3 ways. We generate insights, we learn things we genuinely don't know. So it's really important that we ask actual questions that we don't already know the answers to, and that brings us to learn things that often make us think completely differently about maybe things we had been sitting with for decades. We drive those insights into our organization. IKEA is an enormous brand. It's many, many companies. It ranges from our investments portfolio through to innovation. We have IKEA shopping centers, and then, of course, all the retail experiences that you as a consumer understand. So these insights get driven into every single touch point that we have within the organization. It goes into shaping the way we innovate across the whole value chain. So all the things that we explore that customers aren't necessarily interacting with, using it as a provocation. I like to use it as a point of departure for more empathetic design thinking or innovation. Yeah. So we always try and frame what-if scenarios. What if IKEA could build communities that really improve people's mental health? What would that look like? These really big questions that I think generate much more interesting ways of innovating. And of course, it goes into product design. So we take it to our friends in Elmhult, and they use it as part of the insights that go into product and service design as well. So it really does go in and become actionable within the organization. But crucially, we share it as well. So that's the third thing we always do. We don't just put our arms around the data and say, this is just for us to know. We want to share it with as many people as possible, because we can't be the only people that...
Who has that knowledge.
No, and we can't fix it on our own. No. We saw from COP, it's not a single person's or a single organization's campaign. These are big systemic issues that need big systemic responses. So it's about sharing, which is why it's so great to be here and to share with you guys. But whoever that might be, whoever's interested in it, we put as much of it as we can out into the world, which is why we have the website with the reports on, and we just try and make it as accessible as possible.
So anyone can go in and
anyone
read the report.
can read it.
And we had Sinus Lynge from Effect earlier on, who told about a fantastic project they have with IKEA about building these communities. And I guess a lot of those findings are also from your report.
Exactly. Yeah.
Ingrid, how does VELUX? How do you use this data on healthy homes?
Yeah. So echoing what Katie said, of course, we also use them internally to share in terms of our product development and our view of future buildings. Then secondly, we try also to democratize the learning. So we do a lot of SOME activities and PR activities, basically to raise awareness in the population, the general public at large, because we still find, as I mentioned before, that quite, you could say, obvious behavioral changes and obvious points that could really improve health are not really known to people. And then thirdly, what is the aim with this specific Healthy Homes report is also to try to raise the conversation to a macro level. So move from a case by case, where we have lots of cases showing how health and how proper, you could say, or healthy building design helps your mental and physical wealth and well-being and health. But really raising, what does this mean for society? Yeah. What does this mean for future generations, for the way that we're going to build? Why is health so important when you talk about sustainable buildings? Why is it an important component on the same level as working with environment and energy CO2 issues? So we really found before we started doing this report that there was this complete lack of macro data and a macro understanding of healthy buildings as a topic. So and we will continue to work here, and I think over the years, now it's the 7th year that we're making this report. I think that we have really become more and more knowledgeable, and it's building upon also the previous years, and we can really still see a need for keeping on heightening or strengthening the awareness of this topic.
Yes. Very much so. Katie and Ingrid, I would like to thank you both for participating in this really interesting talk about our homes and our mental well-being and our health. And I wish you the best with your data. Thank you very much for participating.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. And now it's time for 2 more picture kuchas. These very passionate, brief presentations. The first one comes from Martin Haas. He is talking about the Alna Turner campus, how you turn earth and microclimatic forces into sustainable architecture. And afterwards, we'll hear from Susanne Brorson from the studio. Susanne Brorson, she will be talking about understanding environmental factors and climatic adaptations in vernacular architecture. Very interesting. Please enjoy the Pecha Kuchas.
Hello, everybody. My name is Mark Spendelmeyer. I will show you a very short selection of 2 of our projects from our office 1:1 architecture. which was founded in Vienna in 2006 by my colleagues Katharina Bayer and Markus Zilka. Today, we are an office with 3 partners and about 20 employees. Our office works mainly in and around Vienna. Besides housing, we focused in the last years on co-housing projects. We are working now on our 11th co-housing project and also on the first one in Germany. If you do co-housing projects, you have to rethink the role of an architect. It's not the one genius architect who comes up with all the ideas alone in his office. We understand planning as a cooperative process in which we try to form the architecture out of many different ideas. So we need people, future inhabitants, who are willing to invest their energy in something not yet existing, not yet planned. So they need to be confident that together we can accomplish something new. Together we need to find a vision which helps us to see the common goal. We need a plan, a strict organizational concept of the planning process, the decision making, and the whole communication within the group. But you also need flexibility. Flexibility in mind, flexibility in the process, flexibility in the structure, so the building can adapt to the needs of the future inhabitants. And finally, you need more time to inform, to discuss, to try different solutions, and also to celebrate. If you're willing to work based on these methods and guidelines, your own projects will surprise you from time to time. Gleis 21 is a co-housing project with 34 flats, 315 square meters of common rooms, and 550 square meters of business space. With an open and very communicative circulation, all flats get light from 2 sides, with a music school in the basement, which gets light from 2 courtyards, with a professional event space managed by the inhabitants as a public attractor in a totally new built neighborhood. And the inhabitants wanted to live in an ecological responsible building. So it is a timber concrete hybrid construction. For example, you see the timber roof of the common kitchen on the rooftop. The Wohnprojekt Wien is based also in Vienna with 39 flats, and it's the home of about 100 inhabitants. Maybe it's also important to mention that both projects I'm showing are subsidized housing projects. If you relinquish on the one hand, you can maybe afford something on the other hand. The inhabitants manage together not just the house, but also a little coffee, situated next to a big park. They have a shared sauna space and a guest apartment on the rooftop. And because they wanted to have less cars, and when they moved in, they had only 6 cars. There are just 8 parking lots in the garage, but there's a bicycle room for space for 2 bikes for everybody. And there's a big multi-use space for meetings, workshops, and parties. Thank you for your interest.
Hello, my name is Kasper Bjørkskov. I'm the head of innovation at Effect Architects. I'm here today to talk about a concept called living places. It's our vision for healthy homes for people and planet. The project unfolds a regenerative approach for the future environment. It's ideated in partnership with Effect Architects and Mo Engineers and VELUX. So today our built environment faces a multitude of challenges. The lifetime of our building is decreasing, productivity and efficiency is stagnating, and our built environment accounts for 40% of global CO2 emissions. We spend up to 90% of our time indoors, but fail to build for a good indoor environment. And even though we live closer and more connected than ever, we feel more lonely, anxious, and stressed. At the same time, only 7% of global population can afford formal housing finances. And our built environment is actually unattainable for the people that would benefit from it the most. So we already know the technologies and have the knowledge to turn these challenges into potentials. So building design for adaptability and flexibility can enable us to adapt to the challenges we cannot foresee. A new construction method like prefabrication can increase efficiency and reduce waste. And by using CO2 sequestering materials, we can switch from being a part, buildings being a part of the problem to being a part of the solutions. Designing with healthy indoor principles, our buildings can contribute to making us healthier. And by creating environments that enable community, we can reduce anxiety, loneliness, and stress. By using affordability by design, we could unlock affordable housing for the many. So we know innovation happens when we see a change in behavior and new technologies merge. So first of all, what we see now is that the way people want to live is changing. And secondly, the way we build is also changing. So what we need now in order to live up to the demand is aspirational design and visionary partnerships. Together with our partners, we wanted to connect people and planet through building design. So our approach is translated into 5 principles: healthy, shared, simple, adaptive, and scalable. And in the healthy principles, we asked, by considering the selection of materials, building techniques, utilities, and design configurations of indoor and outdoor spaces, is it actually possible to reduce emissions and enhance health for occupants at the same time? So by carefully considering each stage of the building life cycle and understanding that each implication of the design choice, we are able to reduce the emissions significantly. Our research shows that we are able to reduce the emissions with 70 to 75% already today. And by working with healthy building principles and making it a foundation for the design, our simulations show that we can enhance well-being and make homes that contribute to making us healthier. So in the shared principle, we asked, could we strengthen the sense of community by designing settlements with shared spaces, resources, and outdoor areas and amenities? So what we did was, by dividing space into what we absolutely need in our homes and what space we could share, we were able to reduce the square meters significantly and create a settlement that promote access over ownership by sharing more. Shared living showcases how we can live closer while enhancing our way of life by creating active communities that significantly reduce the environmental impact, reduce land use, and all whilst actually creating better living environments for all of us. In the simple principle, we ask, can we design a simple modular building system that requires little to no maintenance and could easily be upgraded, repaired, and fitted with smart appliances to extend the lifetime of our homes? So by separating the technical system and building system, we're able to create a system that enables longer lifetimes, circular economy, and reduces overall cost. And by creating a dumb house that can be fitted with smart appliances, we seek to rethink the way we construct our homes. The last decade, we've been seeing innovation through addition, resulting in increase in complexity and added cost. So we want to challenge the status quo by innovating through subtraction. The adaptive principle asks, can we create a scalable solution and that responds to the needs for more ways of living? We know that 80 to 85% of all new square meters are between 1 to 5 stories. Therefore, we created a catalog of typologies within this range. The envelopes are designed to enable us to abandon the notion of homes that are one size fits all and enable homes that respond to the needs for more ways of living. So it's a flexible solution that can adapt to locations spanning from greenfield developments to urban areas. To prove the adaptability of the living places concept, we continue to test the project on multiple sites. So in the scalable principle, we ask, can we rethink the way we design, plan, manufacture, and finance our homes to unlock housing for the many? So by combining affordability by design, resource loops, and new manufacturing principles, we can lower people's entry points to the housing market and ensure scalability. All the principles combined constitutes our attempt to show a new way forward for the building industry. A vision for how we together can create healthy homes for people and planet. Thank you so much.